Now, the question isn't whether Islam itself is violent. It's what its adherents believe, because that's what they act upon. There's plenty of violent material in the Old and New Testaments. Hey, I'm an Orthodox Jew. I read the Old Testament a lot. But believers in those particular texts are not currently ramming airliners into towers or beheading journalists or mutilating female genitalia.
If we want to take a look at Iraq, there is at least 1 million, probably even close to 2 million dead. We invaded that country, destroyed it, created millions of orphans, millions of refugees, and never even so much as apologized for that. Let's go back to Vietnam, where we dropped 20 million bombs, more than all of World War II combined. We have destroyed so many countries. We have tortured and killed and maimed and raped around this planet. Who in the hell in their right mind would consider the United States or the West in general to be in any position to punish anybody? Never mind the obvious facts that this is a false flag attack and a long list of false flag attacks, which let's get into that, please.
Now, the question isn't whether Islam itself is violent. It's what its adherents believe, because that's what they act upon. There's plenty of violent material in the Old and New Testaments. Hey, I'm an Orthodox Jew. I read the Old Testament a lot. But believers in those particular texts are not currently ramming airliners into towers or beheading journalists or mutilating female genitalia.
And it's amazing for you to say that, well, look at all these Muslims, the minute you give them a little bit of freedom, they go wild and they start being all violent. How can you be a citizen of the United States, the country that has generated more violence and militarism in the world over the last 5 or 6 decades, and say, look at those people over there, they are incredibly violent? We play a significant role in what has been happening in the Middle East because we've been interfering and dominating that region in order to have access to the oil.
I wasn't talking about violence. I was talking about theocracy. That doesn't happen here.
No, well, okay, that doesn't happen here, but at the same time, Iran isn't invading lots of other countries and occupying them for a decade, nor are fundamentalist Muslim countries the way the United States is. So these things are interlinked because we are continuously interfering in that part of the world. And so to say...
Really, it's all our fault?
It's not all our fault, but when you send your military for 6 straight decades into other countries to bomb them, kill their children and women and innocent men, prop up dictators, yeah, you take responsibility for your actions and say, to the extent that that region...
That religion goes back 1,000 years before our revolution, so I don't think we can take all the blame.
I don't think we should. I think we should take a lot of it. And there's lots of bodies and corpses that have been piled up in the name of Christianity and Judaism as well.
Not recently.
Have you heard of the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza for the last 50 years, motivated in part by extremist views of Judaism, or the wars in Europe, or the fact that there were generals in the United States saying we have to go and invade and destroy Iraq, a country of 26 million people, because our God is bigger? Lots of religions, not just Islam, produce violence.
There's plenty of violent material in the Old and New Testaments. Hey, I'm an Orthodox Jew. I read the Old Testament a lot. But believers in those particular texts are not currently ramming airliners into towers or beheading journalists or mutilating female genitalia. Mutilating female genitalia. Mutilating female genitalia.
Eritrea has almost 90% female genital mutilation. It's a Christian country. Ethiopia has 75% female genital mutilation. It's a Christian country. Nowhere else in the Muslim majority states is female genital mutilation an issue.
So, let's examine the question. Is radicalism in the Muslim world a tiny minority phenomenon? So to answer that question, we need to define our terms. We're really not talking about people who are active terrorists. Radical beliefs are a lot broader than terrorists, and anybody who argues otherwise is being naive or foolish or disingenuous. But terrorists draw their moral, financial, and religious support from those who are not terrorists themselves. So, who are the radicals? Ben Affleck actually was right on this. There are approximately 1.6 billion Muslims on the planet, and they're from 49 different countries in terms of where they have a majority. All the population stats, by the way, are from Pew Research as of 2011. Indonesia is the world's most populous Muslim country. It's got almost 205 million Muslims living there. According to one 2009 poll, it showed almost 50% of Indonesians actually support strict Sharia law, not just in Indonesia, but in a lot of countries.
Now, when you say, well, 70% of the Muslims in nation X believe in Sharia, and that makes 70% of them radicalized, did you ask them what they meant by Sharia? let me put the shoe on the other foot again. I know some of you people do not like the fact that I'm putting the shoe on the other foot, but you know, I saw that one guy. Something was posted today from one of those secret places on the internet, as if there are such secret places. And this guy says, "I'm now sailing in dangerous waters." Actually, I'm just being as consistent as I've ever been. I haven't changed a licking. Let me put the shoe on the other foot. How many of us believe that God's law is good and just and righteous? Be careful. Be careful. What does Paul say in Romans 3? Do we do away with the law or do we establish the law? And is Paul's statement that the law is a bad thing or that it's a good thing as long as it's understood properly? See, you can't say that God's law is a bad thing. No Christian could ever say that who has an inkling of understanding the New Testament, which might say something right there. But we believe God's law is a good thing. But do all Christians have the same understanding of God's law? No. Don't. So why would you say, but X percentage of Muslims believe in Sharia? Do you know what Sharia is? Do you know how many different interpretations there are of it?
So, let's examine the question. Is radicalism in the Muslim world a tiny minority phenomenon? So to answer that question, we need to define our terms. We're really not talking about people who are active terrorists. Radical beliefs are a lot broader than terrorists, and anybody who argues otherwise is being naive or foolish or disingenuous. But terrorists draw their moral, financial, and religious support from those who are not terrorists themselves. So, who are the radicals? Ben Affleck actually was right on this. There are approximately 1.6 billion Muslims on the planet, and they're from 49 different countries in terms of where they have a majority. All the population stats, by the way, are from Pew Research as of 2011. Indonesia is the world's most populous Muslim country. It's got almost 205 million Muslims living there. According to one 2009 poll, it showed almost 50% of Indonesians actually support strict Sharia law, not just in Indonesia, but in a lot of countries, and 70% blamed the United States, Israel, or somebody else for 9/11.
Blamed the United States, Israel, or somebody else for 9/11. Blamed the United States, Israel, or somebody else for 9/11.
According to a series of major polls, about 1/3 of Americans believe that the 9/11 attacks were an inside job or that elements within the American government allowed the attacks to happen or made sure that they happened. I'll show you some of these polls over the years that have covered people's opinions on this. Those who will dismiss this as a conspiracy theory, of course, either just don't know about the long history of admitted, confirmed, declassified false flag attacks and planned false flag attacks by the American government and governments around the world throughout history, but they also just have cognitive dissonance. It's just too painful for them, so it's a psychological protective mechanism for them to live in denial about such activities. Such planned false flag attacks like Operation Northwoods, or the activated one, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which got us into the Vietnam War. Adolf Hitler burning his own Reichstag Parliament building. And then there's also the Gleiwitz incident, where they faked getting attacked from Polish soldiers to justify their invasion into Poland. All false flag attacks. Or the Lavon affair. Go and look up the Lavon affair, where Israel, shortly after the State of Israel was created, actually planned on bombing some schools and killing some children to then demonize their enemies. Oh, but I thought Israel does no wrong. No, go look up the Lavon affair. I mean, it just goes on and on. Operation Gladio, etc., etc.
The good news is that poll after poll makes very clear that more and more people do not trust the official account of 9/11. Around the world, it is safe to say that the majority of people do not accept the official version of the event. In America itself, roughly half doubt or disbelieve the official version altogether. And herein lies the heart of the gift. Despite all of the mass media deception, People are seeing straight through the lies and regaining the capacity to think and process information intelligently. This is absolutely critical in the process of liberating humanity from the bondage and ignorance and division. The official version of 9/11 is a terribly bad B-movie. It is a massive insult to our intelligence and all too significantly reveals the depth of mind control that many in our world are subject to.
On the morning of September 11, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York, while in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon and the Budget Analyst Office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors.